Hello, I'm Doug Atkinson here at Solutions Review, and I want to thank all of our moderators, expert guests, and solution sponsors for participating in these Inside Jam panel discussions. This has been a big year of changes with the launch of the all-new, always-on InsideJam.com community site. For the past 4 years, everyone here at Solutions Review has been leaning in to build the Insight Jam into a celebration of enterprise technology with best practices, expert analysis, and solution showcases. And we want all of you to join us there to keep the jam going into the new year and beyond. If you haven't joined Inside Jam, please do. And if you already have, take a moment to invite some of your colleagues. And again, thank you all for being here and enjoy today's discussion.
Solutions Review presents Inside Jam, a social media community for enterprise technology. Hello and welcome back to Inside Jam Live. My name is Jonathan Paula, and I am once again joined by another great group of experts as we kick off our next panel and continuing in our business intelligence theme today. And that panel is Data Management Automation Tools and Paradigms. We've assembled a great lineup from around the globe. Wayne, Alex, Jason, Casey, Krishna, and Yoav, thank you for joining me. Pleased to have you here. Wayne, you've graciously agreed to moderate, so I'll let you kick off the introductions. 30 seconds or less. Tell the audience a bit about yourself and what excites you about today's topic.
Thanks, Jonathan. Yeah, I've been in this industry 30 years to the year this year. It's surprising. It's been a wonderful ride. Catching it in the early 1990s, focusing on data and analytics. I now run my own company, Eckerson Group, that does research and consulting in this area. Pass it to Alex.
Hey, everybody. My name is Alex Merced. I'm a developer advocate at Dremio. Mainly, I spend a lot of time advocating and evangelizing about data lakehouse and just sort of like the transformative nature of data lakehouses and what they are and all that kind of stuff, but particularly about Apache Iceberg. I'm actually going to be one of the co-authors of the upcoming O'Reilly book, Apache Iceberg, The Definitive Guide. So basically, I eat, sleep, and, well, I just think all the time about data lakehouses and data issues when it comes to data lakehouses. So that's sort of where my mind is at. And with that, I'll pass it on to the next person.
Hello, guys. Jason Thompson. I have been in the SAP landscape since 1998 and specializing in data since 2004, primarily around data migration, data quality, data governance. And I work for a company called Synity, and that's really the only thing that we do. We're very narrow and focused in the data track. So looking forward to the conversation today.
Hi guys, my name is Casey Lai. I am the CEO and founder of Prometheum, pioneer in the data fabric space. I am super passionate about data management automation. And so this is experience from both as an avid user of analytics, someone who built these products, and someone who also purchased these products. And so we are laser focused at Prometheum in terms of automating that entire workflow so that people can actually get answers to burning business questions as easily and as quickly as possible.
Hi, everyone. I'm Krishna Subramaniam. I'm a co-founder and COO of Comprise. I have been in the industry also since the early 90s. This is our third company for me and my two co-founders. And all our companies have to do something with data. We actually created Comprise after our last two companies were acquired, because many of our customers brought up the issue that they're drowning in unstructured data today. And that's what we're passionate about, how to bring unstructured data, which is often hidden and dark, into the whole data management automation conversation.
Hey folks, my name is Yoav Cohen. I'm the co-founder and CTO of Satori. Prior to founding Satori, I was leading the engineering teams of a company called Imperva, a leader in application and data security. What we do in Satori is we help companies streamline access to data in the new world of cloud data stores, helping companies implement self-service and just-in-time access to data with built-in security, privacy, and compliance. Happy to be here.
Great. So let's kick off this panel. I'm going to pick on Casey first. We're talking about this term data automation today, and that's pretty dense and needs unpacking, in my opinion. So if you asked me, my vision for that would be a business user could present a business problem to the data management system, and it would automatically generate a question, find the best sources, create SQL, integrate and model the results, display the answer in a chart with explanatory text, and schedule a daily pipeline to update that chart. So that's kind of what I'm thinking about. May not be what the rest of the panel is, but I'm going to start with you, Casey. What do you think that term data management automation means?
Yeah, no. Well, first of all, you know me, I'm not that crazy about terms in general, or like I guess I'm not stuck to one. But I think the concept is definitely not as outlandish as you think. It actually is a reality, and true modern data fabrics like Prometheum actually has this already working in production with customers. And it's because of the challenge that we hear all the time of business people not being able to get answers they want. And so a lot of forward-thinking, CDOs, CDAOs have already implemented this new way of data management solutions. So now with anything, you always have to make sure that there's good training and process management and so forth. But I don't think it's pie in the sky at all. And I think this is actually the new wave of data management as the landscape's gotten a lot more complex, right? People are looking for solutions that actually are pre-integrated already, that can normalize data access, data syntax, discovery, and so forth, and take advantage of the improvements in infrastructure, right? And for performance, for bandwidth, et cetera. And then lastly, I think with Gen AI, like we're seeing that a lot of the workflow can actually be automated now. So definitely a reality, definitely a welcome reality from our part and the part of our customers that we're talking to.
So Alex, Casey seems to think that my outlandish vision of data management automation is actually reality today. So what is your vision and what do you think of that?
Well, when I think data management, and I'm thinking about the data lakehouse space, because basically if you're trying to build warehouse-like functionality on your data lake, you have to kind of do a bunch of things that your data warehouse oftentimes took care of you. So that includes data management and managing data files, managing your models, all sorts of different, like all these different layers. And that's sort of like what we focus on over there, like at Dremio, and trying to create all these abstractions to manage these things, whether it's automatically running compaction on your Iceberg tables, and one of the things we're working on is also, auto curation of like a semantic layer. So that way, again, when it comes to like asking questions, like you're saying, like, hey, yeah, I have a business use, I have a business model that I need to kind of curate. Can this be automated for me? These are questions that we are trying to answer, and very similar to the way you propose. So I very much agree that this is sort of like a burgeoning reality and a reality as we see, especially a lot of these platforms that are just kind of bringing everything together, where that line between data lakehouse, data warehouse, and all these other types of patterns are really just kind of blurring to just sort of large data platforms.
Yeah, so Casey was talking about automating the user experience, but I hear you talk about automating everything that happens behind the scenes to automate that user experience. So interesting. So let's go to Krishna. You, as you said, you founded a company that focuses on managing unstructured data. So given that focus, what does data management automation mean to you?
Well, I don't want to be controversial, Wayne, but I'm actually going to disagree a little, and I'll tell you why. Everything that Alex and Jason said, and Casey, it all is true for structured and semi-structured data. So if you have data in a CSV file or a JSON file or in a database, there's already some inherent structure, and you're trying to find the patterns from that structure. And that is a better known problem. There's still rough edges there, but we know how to handle it. But 90% of the world's data today is not semi-structured or structured. It's image files, it's genomics data, it's IoT data coming from your car, it's audio and video files, it's seismic data. So it's all of this unstructured data. How do you bring some structure to unstructured data with intelligence and automation so a human doesn't have to do that? And then how do you bring that into this whole data management automation world? That's what we focus on. And I will tell you that in that world of unstructured data, a lot of the solutions today are still at the storage level. They're not yet at the data scientist level. And what we're doing is trying to automate getting structure to that unstructured data, creating a kind of a structured database using the metadata from the data and using context and semantics. So humans don't have to put all that information in. We can automatically build that structure. And then you can do all the things you're talking about.
Yeah, I would agree that, Krishna, that's an untapped area. So kudos to you for going after it. So let's turn to Yoav. I suspect, I could be wrong, that when you hear the word automation, you're thinking about automating user access to data, which is an age-old issue that has gotten even more complex with the advent of the cloud. So have we gotten any closer to a solution for managing data, user access to data?
Yes, I believe so, very much so. Our customers sometimes call this the last mile problem. So you have this great data platform, you have crisp, very well modeled data, but now you want everyone to use it. So what do? Then security, privacy, compliance, they come in and they tell you what you can and cannot do. And if you don't have really powerful automation around managing access to data, what you end up with is a lot of data that you just are struggling to deliver to your users, because every user, every use case requires different security policy, different way of handling that access, different hoops to jump through before you get the access. So definitely, when I hear automation, I think how we can take all of that data that is great and ready to use and make it available to everyone in the company.
Perfect. So Jason, last but not least on this term, data management automation, I suspect you might be thinking about the underlying blocking and tackling required to set up, move, and manage enterprise data, everything from replication to deduplication. I suspect there's a lot of room for automation in that area. Do you agree?
Yeah, I agree. I think at the foundation of automation, you have to have trust in the data, right? And so that's where we primarily put our time. When you look at that, that could be when you move from one system to another. How do I ensure that the data's quality supports the transactional systems, but also supports analytics with trust? And I think within that, we use a lot of automations. I'm interested in the folks on this call because we deal with unstructured data. We have cloud-based systems where we're attaching. So we're kind of the company that attaches to all data, but how do we ensure that it's actually quality data? So if we're pushing that throughout the enterprise, how do we ensure that supports it? When you look at the AI type scenarios right now, I think the unstructured data is going to be a big piece. But I think that's a big piece coming forward in the market. But how do you trust the generative AI data that's fed into the model? The same is true for your analytics or for your transactional systems. So we've spent 25 years of doing nothing more than ensuring that the business is involved in the data enterprise and supporting that, and then trying to create a data practice that creates quality data that allows automation downstream. But then to your point, when we're doing that work, how do we automate, limit the business impact or the amount of time from those folks to ensure it's correct?
Yeah. So Jason, that was a good segue to my next question for the panel, which is on generative AI. And I think there's been a lot of talk about that out there, obviously. But I want to know where it's going to impact data management. So maybe we can start with Casey again. What do you think the impact of large language models and generative AI will be on data management, and particularly in the things that you work on at Prometheum?
I think there is definitely, it's an exciting frontier, and it's actually going to have a huge impact. But I take a little bit of a metered approach in that I think a lot of people have this idea that LLMs are just going to do everything for you. And so I want just to kind of clear the air. I don't think LLMs are going to do everything, right? Because if you look at most enterprises' data estate, for us to get answers, right, there's several solutions that's needed. There's a catalog that's needed. There's a data lake, data warehouse, different data sources, integration tools, et cetera. A single LLM is not all those things, right? So it can help, but it's not going to replace all that. I think where you can leverage LLMs is really in kind of a lot of the translation, right, of kind of human context, natural language, a lot of prompts and so forth. And so if you have like a strong metadata layer or active metadata layer, LLMs do fantastic there. If you have an automated orchestration layer, like a data fabric that already integrates like the discovery and the access piece, that's kind of like a perfect marriage with an LLM, because now it makes one API call as opposed to trying to make 7 different ones and try and put it together. So I definitely think LLMs will accelerate data management automation even more. So I think that's definitely an area that you can see innovation coming out of the likes of Prometheum and many others in this space.
So Alex, what do you think? Are you seeing your customers embrace Gen AI to automate data management and improve productivity?
Yeah. No, I mean, definitely GAI has become generative AI has become a big part of Dremio, where we've introduced features for generating documentation and AI with generative AI, which is an important aspect of data management. It's not just managing the data itself or managing how the data is modeled, but also providing the information so people can understand the context of the data. Like if you're doing a medallion architecture, doesn't always mean the same thing in every data setup. So having that documentation to help people get that context helps. So, but I also agree that everything can just sort of be automated away with purely LLMs, but through other automation tools. And we do kind of explore that. So, I mean, you have the automation of documentation through generative AI, the generation of queries through generative AI in Dremio, and eventually the semantic layer being automated using generative AI on Dremio, but also other things like automating the compaction data files. That's not necessarily generative AI, but as automated. And then there's also other things like our reflections feature that handle a lot of like what you would do with like materialized views, BI extracts, and cubes. And it automates a lot of that, not necessarily through generative AI. So generative AI definitely has its use places, especially in places where the application can be very sort of custom to that particular application. So you need someone to kind of be able to provide a prompt to kind of explain their use case. And as Casey alluded to, like, you know, having just a nice metadata layer that kind of unifies all your sorts of data can really empower those LLMs to reach a lot further. But again, there's a lot of mechanisms for automation all across sort of all the things that make your data work,
Right.
so that way you can focus on modeling and analytics.
Are any of your customers using Gen AI to generate a semantic layer? I hadn't heard of that before.
It's a feature that we're working on. So right now, the main Gen AI features we have are generating queries and generating documentation.
Excellent. All right, let's turn to Krishna. Given your focus on unstructured data, including text, you're right in the middle of this whole AI upheaval. So where do you see all this heading?
Yeah, it's very interesting, Wayne. And actually, our customers are starting to use generative AI. I'll give you two examples that might be helpful. So usually when you look at unstructured data, one of the problems you have is that you don't have that much information about what's inside the data unless you crack open every file and look at it. And LLMs can play a role in helping enrich this context around the data. So some of our customers, are using LLMs to take images, for example, and tag, which images have a particular celebrity in it, or which images might have objectionable content in it. And you can use LLMs to do some of this recognition. But then you need a human verification layer, because we all know LLMs also have hallucinations and they do give false positives, and the technology is still new. So data management plays a role in feeding the right data to a generative AI, but then in also validating the output and ensuring you're enriching the right data with the right context. The other way our customers are using generative AI is by building their own custom models. And the thing you have to be careful about, especially when an enterprise is sending data to an LLM, is that you know what the security, privacy, and lineage of that data is, because you don't want to send corporate data into a public LLM, for example.
Right.
And you've got to make sure you're also auditing what is being sent, what are you getting back, what is the lineage of that data? Because if you get a lawsuit tomorrow, you can't just say, well, the LLM did that. Ultimately it's on you, right? If you used it and you then generated some output and something bad happened from that, the enterprise is responsible. So that's where we're working on. We're calling this security, privacy, lineage, ownership, and governance, SPLOG. But that interaction of data and AI, I think, still needs to be formulated, and standards need to emerge around it. And we're actively working with other vendors to try to build these standards.
Great. So Yoav, Krishna talked a lot about some of the risks of Gen AI, which have been well publicized. You focus on security issues. So what do you see as the major risks of Gen AI, and how can we as organizations mitigate them?
Sure. Yeah, I can totally relate with what Krishna shared. I helped my daughter with her math homework the other day, and like we're giving ChatGPT these equations to solve, to check our answers, and then we see that it got one wrong. And that's like, if I'm not equipped to actually understand what is being generated for me, that's just a simple, like, innocent, naive example. Think about what happens at scale. But when, if I focus on the professional field, and piggybacking on what Krishna said, there could be huge amounts of sensitive data being shared with Gen AI systems today, either by users inserting that data into an LLM. Hey, ChatGPT, please format this customer list and find some things for me, or by companies building products based on LLMs and sharing customer data, patient data, things of that sort. A lot of companies are really moving fast in building Gen AI based solutions for their customers. Obviously, good intentions, but the speed of that process is disturbing to me. I do believe companies need to have a strong foundation of data access, purpose-based access control, auditing, that would introduce supervision into this process of using sensitive data in the context of Gen AI.
Now, Krishna mentioned, and I think I got this right, Krishna, that you can use Gen AI to verify its own output. And I've heard of that before. And I'm wondering, Yoav, if you think that's a wise thing to do.
I think
Sorry,
that...
I may just clarify. I was saying you can use Gen AI to create some data which then a human should verify. It's the reverse. So, for example, sifting through 1 million images to find the 5 images that might have JFK in it, that's what the LLM can do. But it might have found 10 images and maybe 5 of them are wrong, or you don't want them. So the final step of human verification is where the human can add oversight, just like the example you gave of his child and the formulas. Because a human looked at it, they could say, well, one of these is wrong, and maybe the other 9 were right. So
you need a human to verify the output. I guess I'm wondering, because I have heard that people are using Gen AI to validate Gen AI output. I don't know if that makes sense or not. What do you think, Yoav?
I think it makes sense. Algorithmically, Gen AI has a lot of randomness built into the process, a lot of entropy. That's why if you run the same prompt twice, you'll get different answers. So I think definitely you can come up with a statistical method of verifying correctness of answers based on repeating your question, repeating the process, and seeing what you get. I think it could be a good approach.
Interesting.
But aren't you going to get more bias? Isn't there a risk that if Gen AI is already flawed, if some models are flawed or have hallucinations, wouldn't that kind of be pairing hallucination on top of hallucination?
Could be. Maybe you want to use multiple models. Like, hey, Gen AI, I need a second opinion, please.
And NVIDIA would love you for that.
Yeah, we could get carried away.
I think it's also important to note, I think many of the other panelists mentioned this, AI is not just generative AI. There's actually very good predictive AI or, algorithm-based AI, which is highly accurate. And so you don't always have to use just Gen AI alone. I think it's captured everyone's imagination because it's so relatable when you ask something a question and it answers like a human. So you can understand it better. But it's not the only form of AI.
So Jason, I think we can all agree that garbage in, garbage out. This as well as anyone. It's especially true with Gen AI. What do you think about the data quality aspects of Gen AI?
Yeah, so where we came from, it took probably 20 years coming up to the last 5 years where people realized data quality for a transactional system, which is structured, is very important. We're playing with Gen AI internally where we're think of all the SharePoint documents, PowerPoints, everything we have in our enterprise. And we found very quickly that it was giving the wrong answers. And so we've come up with a feedback loop actually into our AI models to correct information that's wrong. So I agree with the panelists that if you're feeding an AI model the wrong information, you're going to get the wrong information. And we had situations internally where we said the wrong things because the data that fed that model was incorrect. So how do you govern that, right? I'm looking at that as like a leading place as we move forward of again, how do you validate the information going into the model? And that's not just once, it needs to occur over time and kind of repetitively. And it fits into kind of our data quality model there. Now, I think there's a lot of pluses to it. We see, because my company's been around for 25 years, people doing consulting, learning many things, documenting them. So it's huge to our internal company and our clients. If we could use generative AI, if you have a question about how you're doing something or want the background, but there's also that risk inherently there that, like, you go to Google and read something that's not true. And so I think it's a place that we're looking at a lot. But I think the data quality probably is one of the bigger pieces of generative AI as we go forward, because I think a lot of mistakes will be made. I mean, you could make legal issues occur in your enterprise because you trusted Gen AI. And so again, I think it's going to really bring forth, do you trust the information you feed into your model? And then how do you keep up with that long term, which to us is data governance and data quality, to ensure that you even check information that's been sitting out there for a year or 6 months and say, our business has changed. Is this still true?
So what we're seeing is that to address some of the hallucination issues and the quality output, companies are actually feeding Gen AI with a sandbox of their own information. So they're not just taking ChatGPT off the shelf and using it because there's too much risk there. So are all of you seeing that as well, that we're going to be in the future using Gen AI on our own data? And then that obviously emphasizes the importance of making sure that data is clean and accurate. I'll just throw that out to anyone.
I agree. I'll speak to this real quick. I think you're absolutely true. And we looked at ChatGPT initially and we just said, that's our assets, right? And we're not going to expose our assets out. To your point, we could accidentally have contracts from a customer or something, right? So keeping that firewall, if you think of production systems, you've got different domains that protect production versus other areas. But at the same time, we've got a client base that wants to see generative AI that goes to them. And so to your point, how do you separate the models, the vectors, really separate them? I think they have to be separated like a production versus a QA landscape. And then how does legal get involved? Audit, all these people have to be involved if you are going outward and client facing to say, I'm not, sharing private data or, showing our competitors something that's secret sauce within our organization. So for all the gain, I believe there's a lot of risk. And I mean, we could talk about how it takes over and rules the world. The funny thing is, just in an organization as we all work, right, you've got to maintain their data and support it and keep it safe, right? And so again, this creates kind of a paradigm shift where people really have to think about how they use it and what audience is allowed to be a part of it. And I honestly think there's already been legal situations that have occurred through this, but I think we're going to see more of that, and that will set precedents and caution in the market as we move forward.
It's an implementation question, Wayne, right? It's you can leverage the technology, but how you implement it in terms of how you give it access to the data, it's going to help you control what you can and should not do. But I think there's also a practicality aspect. Yes, you can train it with your own data, which will reduce hallucinations. Yes, you can control access to it, which improves security. But there is also that aspect of Gen AI, which is that natural language aspect, that it's just going to get better. It's just going to be better if it was a public LLM versus a private one. So it's kind of like, in the old days, like everyone thought you can use a corporate ontology and everyone's going to say the same thing. Guess what? After 30 years, Wayne, that hasn't worked, right? That's why Gen AI is so addictive, because of the natural language model. So I don't think it's one or the other. I think you can actually implement it in a way where you get the best of Gen AI in terms of their ability to understand natural language, but still control and relegate it to what's relevant for your domain, your data, and then also control the type of access it sees or does not see. So that's the best of both worlds that I think you can actually do. And it's something that, again, I think a data fabric like Prometheum actually lends itself very well to implement these things.
Terrific.
Yeah. No, I don't know if you want more conversation on this or you want to move on to another topic, Wayne. But
go ahead.
Okay, I was just going to make one point. I think people in general, the more things you tell a person to do, if you say, hey, watch for this, do that, do this, generally we're not good at following all those rules. Like, and it's very hard to educate every person in an enterprise, on like what to do with data. And I think that's the risk, when you're using generative AI and you have to feed it things. And if you're asking people to make that decision every time they're feeding data, uh, then there's more a chance of risk, and that's where I think data management automation can really help. Because if you say, look, use this thing to find the data and move it to the LLM, and because you're using a tool, that tool is going to add guardrails. It's going to check if there's PII data. It's going to check if there's corporate data. It's going to create an audit trail for you on what data was fed when. All of this can be automated by using data management to find and move data as opposed to manually letting it in the hands of users.
Great. Thanks, Krishna. That's a good way to tie up that discussion on Gen AI. But let's move on to some other topics. One thing that we see at Eckerson Group is companies struggling between openness and control, giving users access to data so they can share it and gain insights versus locking it down so valuable information and private information doesn't get exposed. So, Yoav, you specialize in this space. What advice would you give organizations who want to thread the needle between openness and control?
Sure. So if you think about this, you have your external threats and you have your internal threats. External meaning like hackers trying to harm your organization, but you also have employees acting carelessly in irresponsible ways or just making mistakes. I meet a lot of companies, a lot of organizations. There's one story from a financial services organization that we all know that I've heard, and that is that they know their employees are being approached with propositions to steal data for money, for reasonable large sums of money. Now think about a person in that situation, even a compromised person, maybe someone with a financial problem, someone with maybe a drug abuse problem, or anything else that proposition would be appealing to that person at that time. Now, if that person knew they would get away with it, increases the chances of that person doing something stupid. However, if employees in your company knew that when they need to access data, they need to go through a process, they need to provide a business reason, maybe they need to check a box, and they know their activity is being audited, in layman's terms, they're being watched, then that would, I believe, decrease the probability of data theft from within the organization significantly. Because if that person, that compromised person knew, they are likely to experience the negative outcomes of that action, they would most likely not going to do it. And you can have the best security systems in the world. At the end of the day, I agree with Krishna, people can just act in irresponsible ways. And we all know the limitations of technology in limiting what people can do with data. I can take a screenshot of an Excel spreadsheet. If Snowden was able to exfiltrate data out of the NSA, we can all agree that all systems have these sensitivities and ways to actually get to the data. So my advice to these companies is you have to work on awareness. You have to make sure employees know they're being watched, and that helps promote responsible usage of data and dramatically reduces risk.
So just quickly, how do you convey to business users they're being watched when they're accessing data?
So it's a good question. There are things you can put in the chairs. Now, I'm kidding, but what we do, for example, in Satori, we give every person in the organization what we call their own personal data portal, and they can see all of the data sets they have access to. And if they need to access a data set, they click on the data set and they choose the access level that they need right now. Maybe I work in a healthcare organization, I need access to health data of patients. I can go in and click, yes, I need access to this data, and yes, I need access to the sensitive data. So based on what I choose, then I go through a workflow, a process to get my access approved. Could be self-service, could be, I have to jump through 3 hoops and get, 3 signatures. Doesn't really matter. But if I go through this process, I know the company takes this seriously. And I also know that every query, every access to that data is being audited by our system. That creates that situation of awareness.
All right. So the close cousin to data access control is data quality. So Jason, you know better than anyone, data is very slippery and requires constant vigilance to keep it clean, consistent, and timely. What would you say to organizations for how they can stay ahead of the curve and deliver trustworthy, usable data on an ongoing basis?
I think first of all, data has to be a critical part of the business, which means organizationally you need ownership from the C-levels down through all the folks that would manage that data. Not only from a quality perspective, but also when you look at the analytics and the end users that get to that. I think if you don't trust the data and you don't have quality, I think it creates the scenarios you talked about where people want more ad hoc capability to come up with their own answer to the same question. And so if you really look at data quality and data management, part of it is defining KPIs, defining the key factors that drive the business. And honestly, you should not be doing, self-service queries in those scenarios, or otherwise you're going to come up with your own answer. And then you've got different answers in the business, and that creates distrust as well. So, for me, I think it's critical for organizations to understand that data is a critical asset, probably one of the most critical assets in their enterprise. And so we work with a lot of our customers to not only create the organizational set that manages it, because I feel like if you implement data quality, master data management, or any other thing without, ownership going to the top, it will fail. People won't do the work, and then it will just go by the wayside. So I think it's strategic to be organizational first, treat that as assets, have key folks that's their ownership, have metrics and KPIs, and align that to the KPIs that run the business through analytics or through your transactional systems.
Yeah, that all makes so much sense and seems so easy when you say it, but so
Very
many
common.
organizations have such a hard time doing it.
Yeah.
And what's interesting, one thing you said about quality spawning silos, that's so true, right? The worse your quality is, it's going to generate more and more silos because people only trust the data they create, right?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And you get different answers, and,
So we see a lot of companies on that downward spiral, and it's just so hard to get out of it.
Yeah, no, it's not an easy thing. And to your point, there's a lot of change management, right? And kind of a taking data as a strategic asset, and that takes organizational top down to make that work, right? And get people engaged. And I think as companies are good at data, you do have that ownership. They really take pride in it. There's catalogs that define what that information should mean, what your KPIs should be. And so when somebody leaves the company, at least you could backfill and have those assets remain and move forward. And I think it's key to really all the topics that have been talked about, whether it's unstructured or whatever else, is what does your business need? What drives your business from a data perspective? And you can't boil the ocean and make all the data perfect, but you should really key into those, key KPIs and everything that feeds into it so people trust it. And then hopefully it's not self-service where I can create a query on my own. It should be a report that everybody believes in and trusts, it's easier said than done, to your point.
Yeah, absolutely. So, one thing we take for granted is that there's been this massive shift of data to the cloud in the past 10 years. But a lot of organizations haven't yet migrated completely there. So I want to ask Krishna, what advice would you give organizations that want to make that shift, but lack the time, resources, and skills to do it?
I think, the workloads that have not yet fully migrated to the cloud quite often are file workloads because, there's not really very good file storage options in the cloud, or they're very expensive. So the advice I would give is start with visibility. A lot of organizations don't actually know how much unstructured data they have, or how much of it is actually being used, or how much it's costing them. And it's not because IT is disorganized, It's because it's a very difficult problem because data is piled up in so many silos. It all starts with analytics. The first thing we always tell customers to do, let's give you visibility into all your data. Let's show you how much data you have. Let's show you what it's costing you. Let's show you what data is good candidate to go to the cloud and why. So I think starting with visibility is the advice I would give, because then you can answer these questions. And also, it may not be that everything goes to the cloud. A lot of organizations, hybrid cloud might be the right answer. It's just having the visibility to make those decisions.
Yeah, so this hybrid cloud kind of implies that your data is going to be at least in two places, if not more, right? And I think for most organizations, it's in dozens of places. So I wanted to ask Alex, because you're at Dremio and you guys use kind of virtualization technology. Traditionally companies have, work to build warehouses and lakes. They have large teams of data professionals to move, transform, and store data centrally. But that seems to be increasingly difficult to do. So would you recommend that companies get rid of their warehouses and lakes and simply access the data where it lies using this virtualization technology?
Well, as far as
or something else?
Well, as far as the Dremio goes, and our mantra is not necessarily for people to just tear out everything that they have, but to be able to work with people with what they have and as a starting place. So yes, Dremio can virtualize, it can connect to data lakes, data warehouses, databases, but it doesn't necessarily mean that is the only pattern that matters, in the sense that we're very big believers in data lakehouse, data mesh, and the values that provide in basically enabling that sort of decentralized management of your data and curation of your data. And then having your data in decentralized places, but sort of having a platform where you can centrally govern it and view it and access it. And that's sort of what Dremio provides. But as far as working with people where they're at, if you're currently using a data warehouse, you can connect to that warehouse. What Dremio does, it enables you to sort of unify that for different use cases. One really popular use case, talking about hybrid cloud on-prem environments, is a lot of times people want to modernize their on-prem environment. And they can connect to Dremio and see immediate performance benefits. But then when they want to migrate to the cloud, it becomes a lot easier because it's just a unified access pane. You're using Dremio before you migrated, and you're using Dremio after you migrate, so your end users don't have to go through this sort of painful relearning, retooling process. But bottom line is Dremio is flexible, so basically it can work with what you're at. I mean, ideal world, and sort of what we're building tools around is sort of that Apache Iceberg based data lakehouse, where basically you land your data as Apache Iceberg tables, and we provide the tools that easier manage those tables to make sure they're performant. We have features like reflections that make the virtualization at scale practical by basically, because usually what happens is that the nice thing about virtualization is that it allows everything to kind of be nice and simple in one place, and allows you to kind of model things virtually, which is sometimes from an access point very intuitive and self-serve, but oftentimes querying everything where it's at can lead to some sort of, at scale can lead to some performance issues. Where Dremio kind of solves that is through its reflections feature, because usually what happens is that you would then have to create this big web of materialized views, BI extracts, whatnot, that then complicates that modeling and now makes it a lot less self-serve. So with reflections, you just flip a switch, and a lot of all that work kind of gets abstracted away, so that way you still just see that simple sort of self-serve logical model, and then that's how your users interact with the data. So it doesn't matter where your data is. Basically, we just want to help you kind of use it and unify it better. So no, I don't want people tearing out their data warehouses, their data lakes. We just want to help them use it better.
Yeah, well, tools like Dremio are good because you can manipulate or move the data anywhere you want behind it, and users don't know any different, right? They're still, as you say, just acting with the semantic model that Dremio presents.
Exactly.
That's one
right.
of the real benefits. So Casey, your product also runs on a data virtualization engine, but you're using it more for self-service use cases. So I guess my question is, every company wants to empower users with self-service tools so they can access the data themselves rather than relying on a data analyst or a data engineer to get data for them. But is that really practical? Isn't it better to empower the power user, not the actual business user, so the power user can answer the business user questions more quickly?
Yeah, good question. And I don't think it's a hard decision you have to make of one versus the other, Wayne. I think analytics is a team sport that will always require those who are good with data and those who have good at analysis, good at business context. So while self-service certainly kind of blur those lines, like the lines don't disappear, right? So like our vision is that for self-service, everyone gets a little bit better, gets a little bit more automated. So yes, there are cases where for simple questions, the business users can do it themselves. But for more complex ones, maybe self-service gets them 50% there, 80% of the way there. And that makes it so that the power users can actually get them to that final step much, much faster. But it definitely absolutely can also empower the power users to actually get a lot more work off their backlog a lot faster. And we've certainly seen that. So I do think there is benefit for both sides. And I think the benefit is slightly different. But at the end of the day, right, that self-service does bring an increase in terms of output and productivity.
Who benefits more, the casual user or the power user in this scenario?
Well, I think at the end of the day, the business benefits more because the power users don't work on data for fun, right? They don't build data sets and data models and queries just for fun, right? They do it because there is a business need. So I think by doing so, they can service a lot more requests. So the overall business certainly benefits more. I think when more business users start feeling more confident to work with data, which is what the self-service gives, that also brings the teams much closer together, right? And actually avoids a lot of mistakes, avoids a lot of repetitive, redundant work that normally happens because the technical team may not have the full context for the business teams.
Great. Okay, so we're going to open this up a little bit. I've been calling on everyone, but I'm going to ask one question to the panel. Anyone can chime in as they see fit, because we are winding down here on our time. So it's kind of like a speed round, right? But the question is, what is the one single bit of advice you would give to other folks in this industry about how to automate their data management tasks? Who wants to go first?
I'll go first. Bottom line, I would just say focus on what is the transformation you want. So basically, on the other end of whatever you automate, how is this transforming your business? What value are you providing your business? So that we can think through what you want to automate and how it should be automated. Because if you don't have a vision of where you're going and you're just automating things to automate things, you might not necessarily get results that you're happy with. So I would say first think about the transformation to your business.
Yeah, I'll just say again, I think organizationally companies need to create a data expertise, right? And all the way up to maybe a CDO, chief data officer, but with ownership that looks holistically at everything that we're talking about. I think data will continue to grow. It's going to continue to be probably more unstructured. It will continue to be in a million places. And I think automation and making it strategic as a company is going to be a must-have for the companies that use data to their advantage.
Yeah, I don't think you can stop the automation train. That genie has left the bottle, train's left the station, whatever metaphor you want to use. And so I think what you have to do is focus on what can you do to make sure that it's safe, it's secure, it's governed, that you're not getting wrong answers. And so I think for that, it comes down to platform, right? How good is your platform that's going to enable the velocity and the agility of automation while still preserving, right, the governance and the security. And so I think the advice would be, you're probably going to have to look a little bit different in terms of it's probably not another piecemeal approach, right? You're probably going to have to look at how can we do things a little bit differently, a lot less intrusively, but can further enable the automation without having to yet make another copy of my data, do complex integration.
I can totally relate to that. Actually, the way we're talking about with our customers about this problem is that you want to have security as a box in your architecture diagram, right? Totally relating to what Casey said. Just don't build something that's just homegrown, fits today's infrastructure. Think about your data platform today. Think about your data platform 5 years ago. It's completely different. Guess what? 5 years from now, it's going to look completely different. You have to invest. It's a platform mindset. It's an infrastructure mindset, security, governance. It's it's table stakes today. You really have to invest. You'll reap the benefits by reducing risk, increasing productivity, and so on.
Yeah. Yeah, I would agree with what all the others said. I mean, ultimately, automation is a means to an end. So, what is the end? What is the business outcome, right? And so, to me, I think it all starts with visibility first because data is piling up, and it's even going to pile up a lot more once you add edge because we've been talking mainly about data center and cloud, but there's a large amount of data piling up at the edge now. So you for me, it always starts with visibility. The first thing you need is something that will give you a view of all your data across all your locations so that you know even what problems you have and you know what problems you want to solve. I think that it starts with visibility. That's what I would leave people with.
You're not referring to a data virtualization tool there, are you?
No, it's not really data virtualization, it's analytics across environments.
Okay.
And yeah, of course, we want to move data transparently without people noticing. You don't have to virtualize to do that because virtualization suggests there's another layer in front of all the data. And what you do, I think in an ideal world, you don't want a layer in front of all your data. You want to access your data from wherever it lives, but you want to manage it cohesively. So you want a single way to manage it no matter where it lives, but you don't want to restrict access to go through a single layer because anytime you consolidate access, you make performance trade-offs and you create lock-in, you create a lot of undesirable effects that people don't want.
All right, you're laying down the gauntlet, Krishna. I bet there's some people might object to that. No layer in front of your data. What do you think, Alex?
Bottom line, I mean, I think it depends on your use case and what you're trying to accomplish. I think for a lot of companies, having that sort of nice single point of access has made it much easier to govern their data, especially when implementing something like a data mesh. Having one place where people can curate those data products across different sources and document those products and share access to those products has made that kind of pattern much easier and much more valuable to kind of, especially at today's data scale, because I mean, you have the data lakehouse pattern because there's just so many different use cases. You can't just kind of warehouse it all under one tool, like a data warehouse, but then you have data mesh patterns because you need teams of people to kind of really be able to meet the SLAs of today's demand. So you really kind of need both patterns. So I do think a virtualization layer, like some of the platforms we talked about today, I do think there's a value in that. Do I think everyone should do that all the time, or there's never need for access outside of that layer? Probably I wouldn't think that. Some people don't need that, and sometimes you do need the access to data outside of that single access point. But especially for like a lot of bottom line business line use, I think there's value.
So I think I should be calling data virtualization data fabric, right? That's the new term for this. But anyway,
I wouldn't object.
Okay, yeah. Casey, I don't think you've responded to the last question yet, have you? Or were you the first?
I have not, but I think everything that everyone says makes a lot of sense. I think I do want to piggyback on what Krishna said around discoverability, right? Maybe she didn't use that word, but it's basically starting out with knowing what data you have, where it is, and I think that's oftentimes something we do afterwards. We do see a lot of people doing that after they've already migrated. And I think with today's technologies, like you actually have the benefit of actually seeing not only where it is and what it's being used for, but you can actually see how it's being consumed. And from that perspective, you can actually make better decisions about what should move over, what should be accessed, and what should not be accessed. So I think that is definitely a very, very important point to start off with.
Okay, has everybody had their word? I lost track. I think we're all set here. So I'm going to turn this over to Jonathan because he's going to come in and close us down.
Yeah, thank you, Wayne. Appreciate you moderating today and great discussion, everyone. It was a pleasure listening in on it. Before we go, I'd like to invite each of you to do some self-promotion, whether you want to promote your blog, your company solution, a podcast, a book, whatever you'd like. We'll start in reverse alphabetical order with Yoav. 30 seconds or less.
Cool. So if your company is struggling managing access to data, specifically sensitive data, head over to satoricyber.com. Check out what we do. Sign up for a demo. We'll tell you all about it, and keep it secret, keep it safe.
Excellent. Thank you very much. And now over to Krishna.
if you have a lot of unstructured data, especially data sitting as files or objects, and if any of the problems we discussed today resonates with you, and you want to get visibility and you want to know how much data you have and how much it's costing you and things like that, we can do a complimentary assessment for you. Reach out to us at comprise.com.
Thank you. Casey.
Yes, I would say check us out at prometheum.ai, especially for the use cases around being able to build data products in an automated way, right? Relevant to today's discussion. So if you want to see data management automation in action, we have a free trial that you can sign up for, where once you connect to your data sources, you can actually see everything that we actually talked about, from discovery all the way through to the creation of data products. So check us out. There's also some great assets that you can download around Data Fabric, what it is, both from us and from notable analysts, like from Gartner as well.
Excellent. Great. Jason, how about you?
If you visit Synity.com, if you have any data needs, data migration, merger acquisition, data quality, data governance, we come with our own platform, but we're agnostic to source and target. So we're constantly dealing with just about everything you could think of. Reach out to us. We will take data off the critical path.
Thank you. Alex.
Hey everybody, again, this is Alex, developer advocate at Dremio. A couple things I'd like you to do is head over to dremio.com. We just released our State of the Lakehouse survey, so you can see some of these new trends regarding the data lakehouse. It's a very interesting read about table formats. Two, also while you're at dremio.com, you can also for free get an early release copy of Apache Iceberg, the definitive guide. So if you're interested in learning about Apache Iceberg and building lakehouses, that's a great thing. And then also just head over to the Get Started page, because you can get started and try and get hands-on with Dremio for free, whether you self-deploy using Kubernetes or use our cloud managed service, Dremio Cloud. Once you see it and you get hands-on with it, you kind of see the power that it can have as far as unifying your data world, governing your data world, and also just making it easier for all your people to get access to the data and some of those cool Gen I features. So check out Dremio.com. Again, my name is Alex Merced. Add me on LinkedIn. I'll see y'all later.
Thank you, Alex, and good for the LinkedIn plug. And last but not least, Wayne, any thoughts you'd like to share with the audience?
Yeah, sure. If you want to learn about any of this stuff in more detail, go to our research website at eckerson.com. And if you want to learn how to do any of this stuff, contact us and our consultants can help you, especially for data strategy, data governance, and modern data architectures.
Excellent. Thank you, one and all. That was a great panel. And to our audience, if you missed any portion, you'd like to go back and replay it, the replay will be available at any time on the Solutions Review YouTube and LinkedIn channels. But please don't go anywhere, because we have another great business intelligence panel for you in just a few short minutes, scaling AI to advanced analytics for big data workloads. Don't want to miss that. Stay tuned right here to those channels. But until then, thank you for watching. My name is John. I'll see you next time.